All right, take two. 20 years ago, I went to this school. And what I didn't appreciate at the time was how innovative our learning experiences were. I began to accept as the norm the inquiry-driven challenges, the creative expression opportunities. That's what our video production equipment looked like back then. I began to assume the flexibility in being able to choose my 8th period when I had the autonomy and responsibility to determine how I would devote my learning time. And after graduating from the University of Virginia, Curry School of Education, I became a teacher. And I sought to provide those same types of creative, innovative, self-driven learning opportunities for my students. What I didn't know 20 years ago was that the experiences that I would have here would still be considered cutting edge today. And in a way, that's very sad, especially given all of the advancements and availability of technology. I mean, that picture is pre-digital camera. Even with the ubiquity of the internet and the proliferation of digital tools, the innovations that I experienced here at Jefferson still have yet to scale 20 years later. Now, I'm not a doomsday promoter about how our failing schools are broken, because I think that there are examples of schools doing things right. The challenge is, how do we get effective, innovative practices to scale mainstream? And when I say scale, I don't mean blind adoption of tools or cookie-cutter reapplication of ideas. What I mean is, how can any school, anywhere, find and apply innovative teaching practices in a way that works for their students? The first step is to address 3 common misconceptions when it comes to scaling innovation in education. The first misconception is that making current practices more efficient actually counts as innovation. Now, there are plenty of technology tools out there that make more efficient traditional, mundane classroom practices like taking attendance and entering grades and standardized tests. And while those tools are helpful, they should not be confused with innovation. Real innovation in education allows teachers and learners to do something new, not just faster. Real innovation in education designs with the future in mind. We shouldn't settle for simply automating the current practices. That will not lead us to achieving innovation. The second misconception is that technical training equals professional learning. Learning how to use a tool is not the same as learning new ways to teach with a tool or having students explore new ways to create with a tool. Too often, the rollout of new tools focuses on technical training about where to point or where to click or where to tap, and it neglects the critical thinking required to truly transform learning experiences. Without deep professional learning that involves conversation among educators and students, new tools are used in old ways. Document cameras are overhead projectors, interactive whiteboards are chalkboards, and iPads are worksheets. And the last misconception, misconception number 3, is that seeing is believing. Now, let me give you a hypothetical example here to illustrate this myth. Let's say a production company came here and made a highly produced video showcasing all of the innovative, amazing things happening here at this school. And then that video is shown widely across the country, every school, every district, every town, every suburb, every city. Now, if we're honest, what would we hear in a room with other educators from other schools watching this video? Well, you know, those aren't our students. That doesn't look anything like our school. I don't know how that would even be possible here. And disbelief immediately sets in. When you're looking at a video of a classroom, what's most visible? student demographics, the furniture selection, the equipment conditions, and what's not visible, the instructional planning process, the built-in routines for supporting students, and all the times before this when everything didn't go perfectly. When watching a video of a classroom, quite often the most visible aspects are actually the superficial things that become distractions, and the most important lessons to be learned are typically invisible to the naked eye. But I have found one example when seeing is believing. It's when I, as a teacher, am able to see a peer educator next door doing something innovative and amazing with their students and getting positive results in student learning. When successful innovation happens next door and the results are tangible, seeing plus feeling equals believing. So how can we make innovation in education tangible? I'm going to argue that we need an education MVP. Now, I borrow this phrase MVP from Eric Ries's The Lean Startup. And in his book, he defines MVP as the minimum viable product, the minimum build for the maximum amount of learning. When applied to education, I define MVP as the minimum viable practice, a clear agreement about the essential elements needed to be put into place so that we gain the most amount of information about what is or isn't working to enhance student learning. This MVP facilitates a scientific process for communicating a hypothesis, testing an idea, measuring results, and then iterating based on those results. The education MVP is testable and replicable. There are clear steps to implementation so that the practice can be applied across multiple classrooms. And then it's tangible and malleable. The practice is concretely defined and captured in a way that can be updated and revised as we learn more about what works. And it's discrete and attributable, meaning educators define metrics to measure progress on specific student learning objectives, and it's based on what happens as a result of implementing this new practice. Now, there are lots of different forms of an education MVP, but I'm going to give one example that we invented with our company, Lessoncast. As an entrepreneur, when we work with schools to implement new ideas, we use a Lessoncast as an MVP. A Lessoncast is a digital presentation where an educator community communicates their hypothesis about what they're doing to enhance student learning experiences. It's created by the community and narrated with their voices. The creation format allows for iteration as the community learns more about what works. And then the Lessoncast can be shared across communities so that other educators can focus on the most essential elements for putting a new idea into practice without actually getting distracted by all of the superficial things that lead to doubt about what's possible. Now, don't get me wrong, an education MVP can include a video clip, but that video needs to be placed within a context that puts laser-like focus on the most important things. Things like, how can this new practice now help us raise the roof and lift the barriers that keep some of our students from achieving their full potential? One of the chief purposes of having an education MVP is to validate learning, knowing that this innovation that we've worked so hard to implement is actually leading to the desired results for student progress. Or finding out that we're not getting the desired results and being willing to learn more about what we need to do differently in order to make that happen. This cycle of building an MVP, putting a new idea into practice, being willing to iterate and adapt and change, this cycle takes time, a willingness to learn. But it's still a faster and more credible process than the traditional methods of annual high-stakes testing that takes data from one year and uses it to plan for the following year's students. When scaling innovation in education, we have to recognize teachers as thoughtful learners and learners as insightful teachers. Quite often, the key to validated learning is everyone here. It's listening to our students. It's providing opportunities for students to articulate when something is or isn't working, and helping students become conscious advocates for themselves. But I'm sure we have no shortage of that here. When scaling innovation in education, everyone's a teacher and everyone's a learner. As a teacher, I sought to implement innovative practices in my classroom. As a school and district leader, I work to spread innovative ideas on a wider scale. And as a parent, I seek environments that provide relevant, challenging, engaging opportunities for my children. I believe that innovative learning should be the norm for every student, everywhere. And as Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology continues to push the boundaries in education, the greater community can avoid falling for the common misconceptions and instead engage in a powerful process of professional inquiry so that innovation here can inspire overachievement with real learning everywhere. Thank you.